The golden rays of the morning sun barely touched the glass facade of Anderson Enterprises when Peter Anderson stepped through its sleek, revolving doors. His polished black shoes clicked sharply against the marble floors of the lobby, a sound that commanded quiet reverence. The faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, but Peter hardly noticed. Clad in a perfectly tailored suit and exuding quiet authority, Peter carried an air of confidence that made employees instinctively straighten their backs as he passed. Yet beneath the composed exterior, the man was weary. The faint shadows under his sharp gray eyes betrayed nights of restlessness, nights spent agonizing over the deal that could either solidify his empire or crumble it. As the elevator doors slid closed behind him, Peter let out a barely audible sigh. The foreign investors were wavering, their hesitation weighing on him like a stone. He needed to spark something unexpected, something real to set this deal apart. When the elevator chimed softly and opened on the 49th floor, Peter was greeted by Avia, his reliable assistant of many years. She handed him his morning coffee with practiced precision. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," Ava said, her voice steady and warm. "The reports you requested are on your desk, and your video call with Tokyo is confirmed for 10 a.m. Peter nodded, murmuring his thanks as he walked toward his office. But as he approached, a sudden movement in the corridor caught his attention. There, wiping the windows with careful diligence, stood Anna Smith, a woman in her mid-40s, her modest janitor's uniform incongruous against the pristine, corporate world around her. But it wasn't her presence that stopped Peter in his tracks. It was the way she worked. Each motion was deliberate and full of purpose, as though the simple act of cleaning windows was her life's calling. A soft smile lit up her face, unaffected by the sterile, unfeeling energy of the executive floor. Peter's brow furrowed as curiosity tugged at him. He turned slightly to Ava, lowering his voice. "Ava," he asked, almost as an afterthought, "who is that woman?" Ava followed his gaze. "That's Anna Smith, sir. She's been with us about 6 months. One of the hardest workers I've seen. Quiet, dependable, never complains about a thing." Peter lingered for a moment longer, his eyes tracing the woman's movements. There was something so genuine about her, a stark contrast to the polished and calculated personas that surrounded him daily. Unable to focus on the mountain of reports in front of him, Peter found his thoughts returning to Anna Smith. Her authenticity lingered in his mind like an idea not yet formed. Acting on instinct more than logic, Peter reached for the intercom. "Ava," he said, his voice firm but uncertain, "I need you to do something unusual." Moments later, Ava entered his office, her brow slightly raised. "Sir." Peter looked up, his resolve solidifying as he spoke. "I want you to purchase the most elegant dress you can find and give it to Mrs. Smith. Then invite her to join tomorrow's meeting with the investors." Ava blinked, stunned into silence. "Mr. Anderson, are you sure she's a janitor?" Peter met her eyes, unflinching. "I know exactly who she is, Ava. But there's something about her and authenticity that I believe could be the difference we need. Trust me." With no further argument, Ava left to carry out the unusual request, though her expression betrayed her doubt. As the door closed, Peter leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. Inviting a janitor into such a critical negotiation, it bordered on madness. But deep in his gut, Peter knew it was right. Hours later, Anna was nearing the end of her shift when Ava approached her, a polished package in her hands and an expression of restrained disbelief. "Mrs. Smith," Ava began carefully, "Mr. Anderson would like to see you in his office. Now." Anna froze, glancing down at her roughened hands and stained uniform. Her voice shook. "Me? But why?" Without answering directly, Ava held out the package. "He asked you to wear this." With trembling hands, Anna accepted the box and opened it. Inside, nestled against delicate tissue paper, was the most exquisite navy blue dress she had ever seen. Her breath caught in her throat. There, There must be some mistake, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ava shook her head gently. There's no mistake, Mrs. Smith. Change into it and come with me. Minutes later, Anna stood outside Peter Anderson's office, her heart pounding in her chest. The dress fit her perfectly, hugging her figure in ways that made her feel both seen and vulnerable. She knocked softly, and Peter's voice beckoned her in. As Anna stepped into the sprawling office, she felt like she had entered another world. The leather chairs, the panoramic view of the city skyline, it was all so overwhelming. Peter stood to greet her, and for a moment he simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Smith, he said, his voice softer than usual, thank you for coming. Please have a seat. Anna lowered herself into the chair, her hands nervously clutching the edge of her dress. Mr. Anderson, I don't understand. Why am I here? Peter studied her for a long moment before speaking. Anna, I've been watching you. Your dedication, your honesty, it's rare, and it's exactly what we need for tomorrow's meeting. The investors need to see something real, something they can trust. That's you. Anna blinked, disbelieving. Me? But I'm just a janitor. What could I possibly bring to a business negotiation? A faint smile tugged at Peter's lips. Sometimes what we think is our greatest weakness becomes our greatest strength. Your perspective, your truth can be exactly what sets us apart. Peter explained the details of the deal, outlining the role he hoped Anna would play. As he spoke, Anna's fear began to mix with an unfamiliar feeling excitement. It was an opportunity she had never dreamed of, a chance to prove to herself and the world that she was more than anyone had ever seen. I don't know if I can do it, Anna admitted finally, her voice trembling. Peter leaned forward, his gaze steady and kind. Anna, I believe you can. More than that, I believe you should. Sometimes, life hands us a moment where we can either hide or step forward. I think this is your moment. Anna swallowed hard, her chest rising with a deep, shuddering breath. She had spent her life in the background unseen, but now she had a chance to step forward. Okay, she said, her voice stronger than before. I'll do it. Peter's smile was genuine, the warmth reaching his tired eyes. Excellent. Get ready, Anna. Tomorrow we're going to surprise everyone. As she left his office, Anna felt her heart pounding not from fear, but from something far more powerful possibility. The sun had just begun to rise, its pale light filtering through the curtains of Anna Smith's small, modest apartment. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and disbelief. It wasn't a dream. There, hanging in her narrow closet, was a stunning navy blue dress, a dress that didn't belong to her world. Anna's hands shook slightly as she moved through her morning routine. Every movement stirring her coffee, buttering her toast felt deliberate, heavy with meaning. It was as though the universe itself was waiting, holding its breath, watching what she would do next. Pausing by the kitchen window, Anna caught her reflection in the glass, a woman in her 40s, her face etched with years of unremarkable days. Yet this morning, there was something new, something she hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. You can do this, Anna, she whispered, her voice barely audible. For the first time, her eyes filled with equal parts fear and resolve seemed to believe it. At precisely 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. Anna froze for a second, staring at the door before finally opening it. Ava, Mr. Anderson's efficient and composed assistant, stood there with a team of people stylists and makeup artists, all carrying large bags and determined expressions. Good morning, Mrs. Smith, Ava said warmly, her professional smile unwavering. We're here to get you ready for today's meeting. Anna's throat tightened. I didn't expect all this, she stammered. Ava's tone softened. Mr. Anderson wants to make sure you feel comfortable and confident. Shall we begin? The next few hours swept Anna into a whirlwind, unlike anything she had ever experienced. Her hair was washed and styled with meticulous care, the knots and rough edges smoothed away. Her hands, calloused from years of labor, were given careful attention, her nails filed and polished to an elegant shine. As the makeup artist gently applied creams and powders to her face, Anna sat quietly, staring at her reflection. The woman in the mirror was both a stranger and an old friend, a version of herself she'd buried under years of invisibility. The makeup artist paused, noticing Anna's distant gaze. "You okay, Mrs. Smith?" she asked gently. Anna blinked, pulling herself back to the present. "Yes, it's just. This all feels unreal." The woman smiled knowingly. Sometimes life surprises us in ways we never expect. And you know what? You look beautiful. Believe me. Anna's eyes widened as she took in the transformation. Her face glowed, her eyes now accentuated by soft shadows seemed to sparkle with untapped strength. When the time came, Ava helped her step into the dress. The fabric slid over her body like water, soft but structured, fitting her perfectly. Anna turned to the full-length mirror and gasped softly. For the first time in her life, she felt beautiful. "You're ready," Ava said with a smile, checking her watch. The car's waiting downstairs. The drive to Anderson Enterprises felt like a blur. Anna stared out the window of the luxury sedan as the city's skyscrapers loomed large, their steel and glass exteriors, reflecting a world that had always seemed beyond her reach. She felt like an imposter in someone else's story, a woman playing a role she wasn't sure she deserved. When they reached the building, Anna stepped into the grand lobby, feeling every pair of eyes turn toward her. Whispers floated around her like a mist. Employees who had once ignored her now stared openly, curiosity etched across their faces. But Ava, standing by her side, offered a steadying presence, a quiet reassurance that Anna wasn't alone. On the 49th floor, the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing Peter Anderson waiting just beyond. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored gray suit, his posture commanding, but there was something softer in his expression as he looked at Anna. For the briefest moment, his gaze widened in surprise before settling into a small, approving smile. "Mrs. Smith," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "you look stunning." Anna felt warmth rush to her cheeks. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I barely recognize myself." Peter extended his arm, a rare gesture of kindness. "Shall we? The investors will arrive shortly." Anna hesitated for a moment before slipping her arm through his. As they walked side by side down the long corridor, she couldn't ignore the shocked stares from other executives. Many of these people had passed her countless times, never really seeing her. Now, their expressions ranged from disbelief to envy. The conference room was a vast, luxurious space with windows overlooking the sprawling city skyline. Anna took a deep breath, letting her eyes adjust to the grandeur before her. Peter turned to face her, his expression serious but kind. "Anna," he said softly, "I want you to know that I trust you. Completely. It's your authenticity, your unique perspective that we need today. Don't forget that." Her chest tightened, but she nodded. "I'll do my best, Mr. Anderson." Moments later, the investors arrived. Leading the group was Mr. Kamaru, a dignified older man with sharp, discerning eyes. Anna stood to the side as Peter greeted them with the charm and confidence of a seasoned leader. Then, to her astonishment, Peter turned toward her. "Gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying weight, "I'd like to introduce Mrs. Anna Smith. She brings a perspective I believe is invaluable to today's discussion." Every head turned toward Anna, and the room fell silent. Her palms felt clammy, her heart hammering against her ribs. But she remembered Peter's words, the trust he'd placed in her, and the version of herself she'd glimpsed in the mirror that morning. Taking a deep breath, Anna stepped forward. "It's a pleasure to meet you," she said, her voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with each word. "I'm honored to contribute to today's discussion and share what I've observed." To her surprise, Mr. Kamaru smiled, the lines of his face softening. "It's refreshing to see such a unique approach, Mr. Anderson," he said. "We look forward to hearing what Mrs. Smith has to say." For the first time, Anna felt the weight of her doubts begin to lift. In this room filled with power and influence, she was not just present, she mattered. And for the first time in her life, Anna Smith believed she had something truly worth offering. The air in the Anderson Enterprises boardroom hummed with quiet anticipation. Executives shuffled their notes, the investors sat with practiced stillness, and on the far side of the table, Anna Smith tried to steady her breathing. Her palms pressed against her lap, her pulse thudded in her ears like a beating drum. Sitting next to her, Peter Anderson, the CEO himself, shot her an encouraging glance as he rose from his chair. His voice, calm and confident, filled the room as he began his presentation. Peter navigated effortlessly through numbers and projections, charts glowing on the screen behind him. His words were sharp, precise, and polished, everything a seasoned businessman should be. Anna sat still, a quiet observer, amazed by how Peter commanded the room. Yet, amidst the foreign investors' stoic expressions, their sharp gazes occasionally flicked toward her, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Why was she here? When Peter's presentation finally came to an end, he turned to Anna. His smile was firm, but beneath it, she caught a trace of something else: trust. "And now," Peter said, his voice lowering slightly, "I'd like you to hear from Mrs. Smith. Her unique perspective has proven invaluable, and I believe it is critical to understanding the heart of our vision." All eyes turned toward her. Anna could feel them, the doubt, the curiosity, the disbelief. For a fleeting second, panic clawed at her throat. But then, as her fingers brushed the fabric of the elegant dress Peter had given her, she remembered. She wasn't just Anna in a dress. She was Anna Smith, the woman who had spent years walking the quiet corridors of this building, listening, noticing, understanding. Slowly, she rose to her feet. Her voice, though soft at first, carried surprising steadiness. "Gentlemen," she began, her eyes meeting theirs, "I may not have years of experience in boardrooms or financial strategy, but I have something else, something I believe is just as valuable a view from the ground level. A perspective from the people who make this company run." There was a pause, a ripple of uncertainty in the room, but Anna didn't stop. She spoke of what she saw every day, the quiet dedication of the employees who arrived before dawn and stayed long after dark. She described the inefficiencies no one on the executive floor noticed, and the conversations she overheard, ideas, frustrations, dreams, all of which revealed the true pulse of the company. Her voice grew stronger, steadier, as she painted a picture of a workforce full of loyalty and potential, yet often overlooked. "What I'm describing," Peter interjected smoothly, "is something you won't find on a spreadsheet or buried in data. It's the soul of our company, the heart that keeps it alive." The investors exchanged glances, their expressions softening. One of them, Mr. Kamaru, leaned forward with genuine interest. "Mrs. Smith," he said, his voice warm, "this is refreshing. From where you stand, what would you say about the company's potential for growth?" Anna hesitated for only a moment before finding her voice again. She spoke of conversations she had heard among frontline staff, brilliant ideas left unheard, bottlenecks that no one higher up had noticed. She talked about unlocking the untapped potential of the people who believed in the company, even when the company had long overlooked them. With each word, Anna watched the shift in the room. The investors were leaning forward now, fully engaged. Even Peter watched her with a mixture of pride and admiration, as though seeing her for the first time. But not everyone was pleased. Out of the corner of her eye, Anna noticed William Reed, the company's CFO, frowning darkly. His lips moved in hurried whispers to the executives nearest to him. Disapproval radiated off him like heat. When the meeting broke for lunch, Anna was surrounded almost immediately. The investors, usually so formal and distant, approached her with genuine curiosity, asking questions and listening intently to her responses. Peter lingered nearby, his pride evident in his small, encouraging smiles. As she followed the group toward the executive lunchroom, Anna's steps faltered at the sound of hushed voices. "This is absurd," William Reed hissed to another executive, just out of sight. "Has Anderson completely lost it? Bringing in a janitor to speak for the company? He's risking everything we've built." The words hit Anna like a punch to the stomach, stealing her breath. Her heart sank as the reality of her position came crashing down. She didn't belong here. To them, she was nothing but an intruder, a reminder of a world they didn't care to acknowledge. Peter appeared at her side, sensing the hesitation. His voice was low, gentle. "Everything all right, Anna?" She forced a small smile, nodding stiffly. "Yes, just overwhelmed, I guess." Lunch was a blur of silverware clinking and polite chatter. Anna sat among some of the most powerful minds in business, but the weight of William's words lingered like a shadow. She struggled to keep up with discussions of mergers, profits, and market projections, her hands trembling as she tried to remember which fork to use. Across the table, William's cold stare reminded her of just how unwelcome she was. When the meeting resumed in the afternoon, Anna could feel the expectations pressing down on her shoulders. The investors wanted more from her. The skeptical executives, led by William, waited hungrily for a mistake. But Anna had made up her mind. She wouldn't, pretend to be someone she wasn't. Slowly, she rose to her feet once more, her voice trembling before it found its strength. "Gentlemen," she began, "I want to be completely honest with you. Until yesterday, I was just a janitor here at Anderson Enterprises. I don't have an MBA. I don't know half the financial terms I've heard today." The room fell into stunned silence. Peter's surprise was evident, but he said nothing, trusting her to continue. "What I do know," Anna continued, her voice clear now, "is the value of the people who work here. I know their fears, their frustrations, their dedication, and that understanding it matters, because they matter. This company is more than numbers. It's built on the backs of people who believe in its future." Then she did the unthinkable. She offered solutions, real, practical ideas to increase efficiency without sacrificing jobs, to improve morale, to bridge the gap between executives and employees. When she finished, the silence was deafening. Then, slowly, Mr. Camaro began to clap. One by one, the other investors followed, their applause filled with something unmistakable respect. Peter seized the moment, his voice full of conviction. "That, gentlemen, is the kind of perspective that will take this company into the future." The remainder of the meeting blurred for Anna Smith. When it finally ended, she felt utterly drained but strangely triumphant. The adrenaline still hummed faintly through her veins as she replayed every word she had spoken. She had faced her fear. She had stood tall in a room where she once thought she didn't belong, and she had spoken her truth. As the investors rose to leave, Mr. Camardo approached her. The sharp lines of his face softened into an approving smile as he extended his hand. "Mrs. Smith, your honesty is refreshing. I look forward to seeing how your unique perspective will shape the future of this company." Anna's fingers trembled slightly as she shook his hand, barely able to process the weight of his compliment. Before she could collect herself, Peter Anderson appeared at her side, his expression a mixture of awe, pride, and something unreadable. "Anna," Peter began, his voice low and earnest, "what you did back there was extraordinary. Risky, yes, but extraordinary." Before she could find the right words to respond, a sharp voice cut through the air like ice. "Anderson, we need to talk. Now." It was William Reed, the company's CFO. His expression was tightly controlled, but his fury simmered just below the surface. Peter gave Anna a small nod before following William toward a corner of the room, where the two men launched into a heated exchange. Anna remained rooted to the spot, watching the day's events finally settle on her shoulders. The weight was both exhilarating and daunting. She had overcome her first real test, but she knew deep down it was only the beginning. The corporate world she had glimpsed was vast, intricate, and far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Still, for the first time in her life, Anna Smith believed she had something truly valuable to offer. Whatever lay ahead, she would not waste this opportunity. The sun sank slowly into the horizon, casting warm streaks of amber and pink across the city skyline. When Peter Anderson finally left the office that evening, the day's events swirled like a storm in his mind. Anna's unexpected triumph should have filled him with unrestrained pride. Instead, the weight of what followed William's accusations, the skepticism of other executives gnawed at him. The hum of the city lights blurred through his windshield as he drove home, his thoughts a tangle of what-ifs and what next. Pulling into the quiet driveway of Peter's mansion, he shut off the engine and sat still for a moment, gripping the steering wheel as silence settled over him like a heavy blanket. Once inside, the echo of his footsteps followed him down the hallway, amplifying the loneliness of the cavernous house. As Peter paused before a framed photograph on the wall, the air in the room shifted. The image Sarah, his late wife, smiling with effortless joy against a sunlit beach, hit him with familiar grief. It had been years, but the pain remained sharp, like an old wound reopened at the slightest touch. A soft voice broke the silence. "Dad." Peter turned to see Sophia, his 12-year-old daughter, standing in her bedroom doorway. The resemblance to Sarah was striking. Her eyes held the same quiet wisdom, the same gentle concern. Peter managed a faint smile. "Hey, sweetheart, how was your day?" Sophia shrugged, a small gesture that spoke volumes. "It was okay." I guess she hesitated before adding softly, "Mrs. Thompson asked for you again. You missed another parent-teacher meeting." The words struck him like a punch to the gut. He had forgotten. Again. Peter exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. "Sophia, I'm so sorry. I promise I'll be there next time." Sophia nodded, but her eyes betrayed her disappointment. "It's fine, Dad. You're busy. I get it." She turned and disappeared into her room, leaving Peter standing alone in the hallway, drowning in guilt. Since Sarah's death, he had buried himself in work, believing it would numb the loss. Instead, it had built a wall that kept him from the one person who needed him most. Later, in his dimly lit home office, Peter poured himself a glass of whiskey. He let his gaze settle on the scattered papers strewn across his desk, unfinished divorce papers Sarah never signed, stacks of medical bills from her battle with cancer, and pamphlets on grief counseling he had never opened. The weight of everything he'd suppressed for years finally broke him. Tears slid silently down his face, tears he had denied himself for far too long. He leaned back in his chair, the empty house pressing down on him. The sudden ring of his phone startled him. He hesitated before answering. "Mr. Anderson." It was Anna's voice, tentative, unsure. "Sorry to call so late. I wanted to thank you for today, for trusting me, and I wanted to make sure you're okay. You seemed shaken after the meeting." Her words, so unexpected, broke through Peter's defenses. There was no judgment in her tone, no agenda, just genuine concern. For a moment he considered brushing her off with polite words, but something about Anna's sincerity made him pause. "To be honest, Anna," he admitted, his voice hoarse with emotion, "things haven't been okay. Not for a long time." He surprised even himself as he spoke, the words spilling out like a flood. He told her about Sarah, her illness, her strength, her loss. He spoke of Sophia and how he feared he was failing her. He confessed to the relentless pressure of holding Anderson Enterprises together while his personal world crumbled around him. Anna listened quietly, offering no interruptions, only soft, understanding words when he faltered. Her compassion, so uncharacteristic of the ruthless corporate world he inhabited, felt like a balm against an open wound. Finally, Anna spoke. Her voice was gentle, but there was a quiet strength behind her words. "Mr. Anderson, Peter, you don't have to carry all of this alone. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is ask for help. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." Her words hit him with unexpected force. In his desperate attempt to appear unshakable, Peter realized he had isolated himself. But Anna was right. Perhaps it was time to stop holding everything in. "Thank you, Anna," he said quietly, his voice breaking slightly. "I needed to hear that tonight." After the call ended, Peter sat in the silence of his office, the weight on his chest finally beginning to ease. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find his way back. After ending the call, Peter Anderson sat in the stillness of his office, the silence pressing in on him like a heavy fog. The weight of the day, the triumphs, the doubts, the conversations settled deep in his chest. Then, almost instinctively, he stood, driven by a resolve he hadn't felt in months. He made his way to his daughter's room and knocked softly on the door. "Sophia, may I come in?" Inside, he found Sophia Anderson sitting cross-legged on her bed, clutching the worn teddy bear her mother had given her long ago. Her small shoulders hunched forward, and her red, puffy eyes revealed the tears she'd been trying to hide. Peter sat beside her, the mattress dipping slightly under his weight. The sight of his daughter like this, so small and fragile, made his heart ache. He hesitated for a moment before speaking, his voice rough with regret. "Sophia, I'm sorry, I haven't been the father you deserve." Sophia turned to look at him, her face carrying the quiet sadness of someone far older than her 12 years. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I miss Mommy." Peter's throat tightened as he pulled her close, wrapping her in his arms. "Me too, sweetheart," he said softly, his voice breaking. "Me too." For the first time since Ava's passing, the two of them allowed themselves to share their grief openly. Tears fell freely as father and daughter clung to one another, finding comfort in their shared loss. It was a moment of vulnerability that, though raw and painful, also carried a sliver of healing, like the first crack of light breaking through a storm cloud. That night, after tucking Sophia into bed, Peter lingered by her door for a moment. Watching her sleep, her breathing steady and calm, he made a silent vow. To her, to Ava, to himself. He would be better. He would find a way to balance the burdens of work and the needs of his daughter. He would let himself grieve, let himself heal, and learn to open his heart again. As he closed the door softly behind him, Peter felt a strange sense of lightness settle over him. It wasn't relief exactly, there was still much to be done, much to repair, but it was hope. For the first time in a long time, he believed tomorrow could be different. Returning to his office, Peter paused at his desk, staring at the stack of papers that had haunted him for months. The divorce documents, unfinished and unsent. The unpaid medical bills, cruel reminders of a fight they hadn't won. The unopened brochures on grief counseling, pages filled with empty advice. He picked up one of the leaflets and sat down, turning it over in his hands. Slowly, deliberately, he set it aside, not to forget it, but to face it. It was time to confront the pain he had been running from for so long. As he prepared for bed that night, his thoughts drifted back to Anna Smith. Her courage in the boardroom, her gentle kindness over the phone, two small but powerful acts that had stirred something inside him. Change, he realized, wasn't always a grand, sweeping moment. Sometimes it started with something quiet and simple, the decision to try. Tomorrow would bring challenges, yes, but it would also bring possibilities. For the first time in years, Peter Anderson felt ready to face them. The next morning, Anderson Enterprises buzzed with its usual rhythm, voices humming, phones ringing, keyboards clacking in a steady, familiar symphony. For most, it was just another Wednesday, but for Anna Smith, it felt like standing in the middle of a roaring hurricane. Every sound seemed louder, every movement sharper. Sitting at her sleek new desk in the far corner of the 49th floor, Anna struggled to focus on the glowing screen in front of her. Numbers and charts swam together, a whirlwind of financial data that felt foreign and impossible to decipher. Her fingers hovered uncertainly over the keyboard when a familiar voice pulled her from her thoughts. How are you holding up, Anna? Anna looked up to see Peter Anderson standing beside her desk, his expression kind but observant. His sharp suit couldn't hide the weariness that still lingered in his eyes, though his voice carried the steady reassurance of a man who believed in her. I'm trying, Mr. Anderson, Anna admitted, her voice soft but determined. There's so much to learn. Peter offered her an encouraging nod. You're doing better than you think, Anna. More than well. Actually, he paused, his gaze steady. That's why I have another challenge for you. Anna's heart stuttered in her chest. Another challenge, she repeated faintly. Peter's mouth quirked into the faintest of smiles, though his tone was serious. The investors were impressed by your perspective yesterday. They want to hear more. So you're going to lead the next presentation. The color drained from Anna's face. She gripped the edge of her desk as though it might anchor her. Me? But Mr. Anderson, I don't even understand half of what's in those reports. How am I supposed to lead a presentation? Peter leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Anna, you have something no one else in this room has a genuine connection to the heart of this company. The investors don't want another set of polished figures. They want to understand the people behind the numbers, and no one can tell that story better than you. His words hung in the air like a lifeline, steadying her even as the weight of the responsibility settled over her. When Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Friday, Peter's tone was gentle but firm. 2 days. I'll assign a team to help you pull it together. Don't worry about the details, we'll support you every step of the way. As Peter walked away, Anna stared after him, her pulse pounding in her ears. 2 days to prepare. 48 hours to step into a role she had never imagined for herself. The panic clawed at her, threatening to drag her under. But beneath the fear, a quiet resolve began to take root. She had come this far. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and the overwhelming enormity of this world, and she had survived. 2 days, she told herself. I'll find a way. Because Anna Smith had learned something about herself in the past few days. She was stronger than she thought. And maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was meant to be.